Hi everyone on Facebook Live. This is Steve Barrett, Editor-in-Chief of PRWeek. I'm here to record our weekly podcast. Thanks for joining us. Do let us know your thoughts, any guests you'd like to see in the future, feedback on the podcast or this specific one, which is with Heidi Hovland, who is CEO of DeVries Global. So welcome, Heidi. Great to have you here for the podcast. Been in the planning stages for a long time. Glad to finally get this done. And we're also here with Frank Washkuch, our news editor and regular correspondent. How you doing, Frank?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm living the dream, mate. Living the dream, the Haymarket and PRWeek dream, as is everyone in our company. That sounded a bit insincere, but actually we love what we do. Perry Simpson behind the dials. How you doing, Perry?
Good.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we're about to go and record formally. So let me know, Perry, when I need to.
Good to go.
Hello and welcome to the PRWeek, PRWeek's regular weekly roundup of everything that matters in the worlds of PR and communications. My name's Steve Barrett. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of PRWeek. Going to guide you gently through the next 25, maybe 30 minutes. Depends how good our guest is. No pressure, Heidi. And it's Heidi Hovland this week, CEO of DeVries Global. Heidi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Looking forward to finding out more about your tenure. It's coming up nearly 3 years now. It's difficult to believe, actually,
it's
isn't
very
it?
difficult
Yeah,
to believe.
that's gone really quickly. Great agency, IPG, Sharp, does a lot of work with Procter & Gamble and other great consumer work. And no doubt other stuff too, which we'll find out more about from Heidi. And we've got Frank Washkuch here, our news editor. How are you doing, Frank?
I'm doing okay. Thanks.
I'm waiting for the week when you demonstrate the same enthusiasm that I do for this podcast.
I'm not a loud talker, as anybody
Are you the yin to my yang
I wouldn't
on
go
the
that
PRWeek news desk?
I wouldn't go that far.
You're missing piece.
That's not.
Some good news stories this week,
Weird.
despite being in the dog days of August and everyone away on
The
vacation.
dog days of August aren't what they used to be, though.
No, that's true. It's busy.
They're kind of busy.
Very busy, and a good month, as Gary Vaynerchuk would tell you, a good month to lay the foundation for the rest of the year. Check out his motivational podcast, Frank. All right, what are we going to talk about? Well, it's quite timely, actually, because Heidi's here, but with Procter & Gamble, their global ad spend is at an 11-year low after they cut their digital spending. So we'll look at the implications of that. Is that bad news, or is that good news for earned media, or is that just a trend in marketing we're seeing all around? We'll talk about the whole Google engineer diversity controversy on the West Coast, which has really spiraled this week and uncovered some old school attitudes, to say the least, and also just sparked debates, and not in a particularly productive way either across the board. We'll talk a bit more about that. Sir Martin Sorrell, he's not off duty in August. He calls Snapchat a flea on the backside.
Of an elephant.
Of an elephant?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll find out what he means by that. We'll talk about a few agency trends as well. And John Iwata has a new role at IBM, one of the best known PR pros out there. So lots to talk about. Well, let's start with you, Heidi. As we said, coming up 3 years as CEO. Where are you at, do you think, when you first joined? You know, obviously you have a plan and you do the whole 100-day thing, and then you start implementing. And back and talk us through how the sort of first 6 months of the year have been.
The first 6 months of the year have been the best so far. So
great.
Absolutely.
That's good, because that's bucking an IPG trend where they've been a little bit down, haven't they, overall?
Yeah, well, when you've had as much growth as we've had year over year, it's kind of hard to keep up as the base grows and grows and grows.
Double digit on double digit on double digit, I think, yeah.
Exactly, but we're off to a strong start with about 10% revenue growth year over year.
Right.
And over the past year, have brought in a wide range of new clients, from Johnson's Baby, which we first won the North America AOR business and became the global hub. Most recently, Sephora and Method. In between became Staples Consumer AOR, and also IHOP. IHOP, exactly, which is a great brand for us.
IHOP has a new CMO, don't they?
They do.
Yes, we reported on that. Yeah.
So all good things.
Do you eat at IHOP, Frank?
I have not been an ad since, which I've never been to either. But anyway,
You have to try the new French toasted donuts.
if I get there, I will.
Yes, Shape It's and just been sold actually to private equity.
Absolutely,
Isn't it?
absolutely. And a lot of strong growth across. So we have a 70% new business win rate so far in
that's good.
2017 for North America. In Greater China, we've achieved already so far this year in new business wins what we did all of last year. And the UK has had more of a challenge on the new business front. I would say fewer opportunities across the board if you talk to anyone, I would guess. But seeing some really nice incremental opportunity with clients like Krispy Kreme and PepsiCo.
Okay. We'll talk more about P&G when we come to the first news story, but how would you position yourself then? What's your sort of story when you go into the market? And because obviously there's lots of PR firms at IPG and Weber and Golin and all the rest of it. So how do you position yourselves?
So there are two sort of ways to answer that. I'll say the first is that one thing we've been noticing and probably really hit me about a year ago, and I've seen that growing, is that our size is an advantage. We can offer simplicity and speed that, perceptually at least, some of our larger competitors cannot. And clients are really sparking to that. We've created a lot of new models that are client first, DeVries Plus, where we really work leveraging the strong backbone of IPG to add geographic or capabilities as needed. So it's been a really successful way to go to work. So that has been a huge differentiator, recognizing the power of that and leveraging it to the hilt.
Yeah, current marketing's doing quite well as well, isn't it? Within IPG,
well.
and they did well at Cannes, and they come in that category too. What about because you've got Huge, or Huge as we should probably call it now in this Trump era. They just took Jason Schlossberg to set up a PR arm. You've got Mullen Lowe sort of coming into PR. They're an advertising agency. This trend is really. We've written about this a lot at PR Week. The whole trend is coming in earned media's direction, isn't it? Or storytelling's direction.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't necessarily mean the PR firms are going to own it forever, does it?
No, it means we need to show up differently and think differently, hire differently. So, the second way to answer your question is we think of ourselves and we present ourselves as cultural decoders, which really is being oriented in data research, analytics, insight, and then bringing to bear the ideas that can work across channels. So earned is more valuable than it's ever been before, but we own the art of the conversation. So how we can spark the conversation and how we can bring something new into a conversation that makes it appealing and magnetic is, I think, where we are far ahead. So we need to stay far ahead because they are catching up. And they want our lunch.
Sure, yeah, no, absolutely. And if you look at, say, Publicis or Omnicom, they've very much gone down the road of going in as a full-service sell, if you like, and almost the MSLs in Publicis becomes part of a whole creative execution. The Omnicom has Karen Van Bergen sort of bringing PR to the group level. How does that work in IPG? Because it's less formalised. Obviously, it's a smaller holding company, but you obviously have strong links with the McCanns and Drafts as well. But how does that work in practice in terms of going to market?
I will say IPG is the most collaborative holding company from my perspective. So it is
because you used to be
easy.
at Fleischmann, didn't you? And so you know Omnicom well.
I know Omnicom well. And Karen is fantastic, and I'm sure is doing a spectacular job. But I think what's different in the way that Omnicom is sort of taking integration into market, and the way that Publicis is taking interdependency to clients, is that it does feel kind of big and hulking and cumbersome to me. The way it works for us, for example, going into Sephora, it became clear that this is the most digitally innovative retailer in the world. So we reached out to RGA and found exactly the right person with experiential background. That
RGA being another IPG firm.
Another IPG firm, and lo and behold, DeVries Plus. Jibo is the world's first social robot. It's
How does that work?
It's really cool. Well, think of it, the easiest way to explain it is, do you have an Alexa?
No,
Well,
So
sorry.
Frank is obsessed with robots, though.
I'm not obsessed with robots, but I'm on their side. We talked about this
That's
last week anyway. So.
They're on your side
Yeah.
too.
Well, for now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, but Alexa will tell you the weather. She will play you a song, but she doesn't know who you are and she doesn't care.
Okay.
Jibo learns you. He knows you. He will know that you're a Yankees fan. He'll offer up the scores in the morning. He'll know.
Which I'm not, by the way.
Yeah.
They're too linked to Manchester City for my liking. Very much.
Manchester.
Yes.
Fan, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
So it's a really cool product. You should check it out online.
So that's more.
Jibo.com.
Would they be more AI?
Founded by a woman, by the way, who pioneered social robotics at MIT,
Okay.
Cynthia Brazil.
Okay. But are they more AI where it learns, whereas
Yes.
Alexa's more of an algorithm that kind of stays
Yes.
at one level?
Yes.
Okay.
It's AI, machine learning, voice and facial recognition, the whole package, and it's cute.
Yeah, we're doing a whole cover feature on AI actually in September, October, and it was interesting because there's a lot of chat about it, but it's difficult to find some real examples of it being used in PR and comms and marketing properly. You know, everyone's talking about it. It's in customer service and retail a bit, but making that transition into your world, our world, is not quite as far ahead of, I think, as people, or if it is, people are not chatting about it anyway. They're keeping it under wraps.
Everyone's circling around it and wants to figure it out, but I think consumer adoption isn't high enough yet for it to really break through at mass level.
But that's interesting what you said about it being of a certain size, and we saw that in the agency business report. A lot of the mid-sized firms grew tremendously. People like Carmichael and another IPG firm, Olsen, Folger and Mortin, and these are also companies that have got an integrated look and feel because of their regionality as much as anything. But how do you, obviously servicing P&G, you've got to have global competence, and I think they made a big point a few years ago, didn't they, of making sure their agencies really scaled up, especially in Asia. So talk us through how you do that, because you did have to expand a lot.
Yeah, exactly. So we are one of 5 global agencies for P&G, one of 2 global agencies in beauty, and basically at the point that P&G said the agencies who will stay with us need to scale, we worked with Weber, and basically the offices in Asia and in the UK that were not Unilever based became DeVries. So that was like the overnight globalization of DeVries Global. Where it got interesting was when they said, okay, how about these additional markets? And we thought again about what can we uniquely do as an agency and as a holding company, that, you know, there is a lot of competitive work within the family.
Sure.
And because we have such a deep and long-term relationship with P&G and recognize some of the challenges they might be having also with this global consolidation, we went to them with a solution we called Deluxe. Deluxe is a bespoke network for P&G that comprises best-in-class, highly rated P&G agencies in the markets they need us to work, where we don't currently have a footprint. So, On Point PR in Milan, Tomorrowland in Australia.
Are these all IPG?
Flair in Hong Kong. None are IPG. They're all independent.
Okay.
But, you know, again, it's client first. It's, you know, what does the client need? What do we need to succeed on behalf of this client? And that was the solution, and it's worked marvelously well.
Yeah.
We had our first Deluxe Summit this spring and brought in all of the partners, brought them into the IPG umbrella, did a lot of sharing, a lot of you know, sharing of best in class, some brainstorming around new business targets. So, you know, that's honestly been the most fun part of this job, is making stuff up as we go, and based on what's the right thing to do, and what do we have available to us, and what's the opportunity.
And some of those might be interesting acquisition targets down the line for IPG.
Right.
Well, that's a good segue into P&G. Frank, talk to us about their global ad spend. It's at an 11-year low.
That's right.
Why is that, and what do we think it means?
That's right. It's down 1.7% for the year ending in June to $7.12 billion. So still a tremendous amount of money.
That's a chunk of change.
Right. That's the lowest level since 2006. Now, the reason it is down that much is because it cut about $140 million between April and June, due to concerns about online brand safety and fraud. And if you remember a couple months ago, that's when the big YouTube crisis was happening about advertising appearing next to extremist content, anti-Semitic content, stuff like that. So it looks like that, and the bigger issue of online brand safety is the reason that this number is actually lower than it has.
Was there also an element of actually they just didn't think it was working, some of the digital spend?
Well, and that's... If you read in the business press, yes, they have been skeptical about how they're spending money digitally, and yeah, they have voiced concerns about that. Sure. How
does that work? I mean, because obviously digital ad spend is not limited to ad agencies, or you guys have to do that now. But paid is a part of every social campaign, isn't it? So, what do you think of the trends and the way they're spending less? Is that? But are you seeing, in fact, that might be good for you because they'll put more into earned and social and owned?
Well, first I want to add sort of a third reason, which was sort of a lack of transparency and accountability, in the sense that there was a shadiness to the whole deal. Yeah. And I think Mark was really frustrated by that, and I think gave voice.
Pritchard, who's the chief brand officer over at P&G.
Probably gave voice to what a lot of marketers were feeling, that what do these numbers mean? Is it right? And then it turns out that a lot of these, eyeballs are actually robotic eyeballs or not eyeballs at all, and so it's.
Good point. This is Facebook, isn't it, and other companies like that, yeah. And
middlemen. So I think the biggest takeaway for all of us is transparency and accountability. And don't mess around with that. And PR has been pushed forever, for as long as I've been in this industry, for greater measurability. Digital has enabled that to a degree we never have had before. So I think the agencies who are willing to really be suitably meticulous about measuring what it is they're doing and surfacing all of that to clients will win. So I have more opportunity for PR, because so much of what's happening, sort of the shift from media platforms to people as media platforms, and the whole micro-influencer trend and all of that, that still sits squarely for now in the PR space versus the advertising space. But for me, it's less about the discipline and more about how you behave. Do
you think P&G will spend less on broadcast as time goes on? Especially the younger consumer, they just don't watch TV, and they certainly don't watch ads. They'll do anything to, screen them out.
I don't recall seeing or hearing anything about that, but it wouldn't, just as a professional in marketing, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. So interesting stuff. When the world's biggest advertiser is doing things like that, that's a big statement. And I think that the transparency thing, the YouTubes and Google, which is part of Google, obviously, or Alphabet, whatever you want to call it, Facebook, etc. They've got to get their house in order, and they've been kind of dragged to the table a little bit by this, and it's the brands who are sort of pushing them on that. So yeah, in fact, we'll talk a bit about that later when we come to the flea on the elephant's backside. But let's Frank talk about this Google engineer.
Yeah, and there's a lot to unpack with this Google story. So there was an engineer at Google over the weekend who he didn't write the memo over the weekend. That's been misreported a few places. He wrote the memo months ago, but it went internally viral, was the term, over this weekend. And essentially, it had a lot of, let's call them old school attitudes about women working in engineering. I don't mean that in a good way. But he argued, the engineer's name was James Damore, and he argued that, quote, we need to stop assuming that gender gaps imply sexism, and said that men are more frequently found in top leadership positions because of, quote unquote, status is the primary metric that men are judged on, while women are more strongly judged by, quote unquote, beauty. So he also argued that there are biological differences between men and women that make men essentially better equipped to be engineers than women. So there was an uproar over this at Google over the weekend. Their new chief diversity officer, VP of diversity, immediately pushed out a staff memo over the weekend to address the matter, and then they fired him on Monday. So their CEO, and I think, acted pretty quickly in flying back from a family vacation and doing an all-hands meeting today, Thursday, and doing a memo that was made public and was addressed to the whole staff, talking about why they made the decision to fire him on Monday. It was a pretty quick reaction by Google, I think.
It's difficult to understand why anyone would think it's a good idea to go down that road, even if you do believe those things, and why you wouldn't keep them to yourselves.
Well, the argument is whether companies should employ people who have opinions like these, or are they being too politically correct in dismissing somebody like this?
As a global CEO of a high-profile company, what did you make of it? And obviously, there's a specific issue here in Silicon Valley and in technology, in that I think Google spent $250 million trying to improve its diversity over the last 3 years. I saw a graphic on that, and it's made a tiny difference, to be honest. It hasn't really moved the needle at all. What's your take on it, Heidi?
Well, first of all, it is baffling because, I mean, the scientific evidence is so strong, backing that diverse teams are better at creative problem solving, come up with more innovative solutions. So what, in what space do you want those things more than Google? I think there was one other piece where at their last shareholder meeting, an investor raised the question if it was permissible to have conservative views at Google. So that is, I think, going to be the next swell coming out of this. Has the political correctness gone to a degree where if you are red instead of blue, you're not welcome, which, that's diversity too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I would say, though, that I don't see what he's arguing as a conservative argument. I see it as a very weird branch of conservatism. I mean, he's not arguing for lower taxes or something like that.
Right.
That's a good point, though, because I mean, after the election, I know some tech companies sent out these missives to their staff and like, "Oh, woe is us, but stay together. It's going to be okay." And they were getting a lot of blowback from their operations outside the West Coast and maybe outside the coastal elites, saying, "What are you talking about? You've got thousands of employees who actually voted for President Trump and who don't necessarily share your views." So that is a very good point about the.
So, but there is, in this environment, people with views like that do feel emboldened.
Yes.
And his cause, as it were, has been taken up by some people on the far right. So, yes, Republican is probably the wrong way to express it, but conservative, far conservatism, whatever the word of the day is to express that.
See, I look at a few specific words that they used in their memo when they talk about the reason for firing him. And I think that when you see words like intimidation, I mean, whether he's specifically trying to intimidate specific employees, I don't know. But when you think about like this whole ultra right-wing echo chamber and how it attacks people online now, there is a big sense of intimidation with that, I think.
I think you're right. And he, just to be clear, what he did was deplorable, and he doesn't belong there. I mean, they fired him, I think, on policy versus these views are wrong. But
it's already got a job offer, though, hasn't he, from somewhere else?
Right. No, I hadn't heard he had gotten a job offer, but he. So yes, he should have been let go, in my opinion, or censured at the very least. But it is a bigger question, and it's not the last of it.
Yeah, it opened up massive debates online and on social between those who actually agreed with him and they were emboldened and came out, and then others, and as with a lot of arguments on social media, they're not the most productive things, are they? They usually degenerate to the lowest common denominator. So,
do you think Google acted quickly enough?
As in terms of a communications response,
because there was a lot of opinion out there that they didn't act quickly enough. Now, I thought they did. I mean, they fired him on the first business day back.
Except this whole sense that over the past month it's gone viral. What
okay.
did that look like? And I think that there had been multiple complaints to HR in the interim. So, yeah, I mean, it is, oh, and what I was going to say also is, to your point about intimidation, he created a hostile environment, created a hostile work environment, and full stop. So that has no place. Intimidation has no place in the workplace. So did they move quickly enough? I wasn't there, but it sounds, I'm always viral over a month.
Yeah, and why did it at that particular point, etc.
It's interesting. It wasn't. I keep cutting you off. I'm going to the next subject. I'm sorry, but it is interesting that nobody reported on it until this weekend. Anyway.
Yeah, a topic we'll come back to definitely, and a big issue in the workplace generally, but also but specifically in technology, I think, and in the West Coast, and we had the whole Uber debate as well, and other tech companies that. 500 startups, Dave McClure, etc. So, some really sort of, you sometimes forget that those attitudes still exist, don't you?
Right.
But they do. Let's talk about some social media trends and platforms. So Snap has been in the news this week. They reported their results, Snapchat, and so Martin called them a flea on the backside of the elephant, and he meant that in terms of the amount of money that WPP spends with them, because they spend an absolute fortune with Google and Facebook, but not so much with Snapchat. Still, I'm sure it's still a significant amount of cash, but and it's very significant in terms of what you were talking about in terms of transparency. And so Martin has definitely been banging that drum too. But Frank, tell us more.
Martin Sorrell is always a man for an interesting animal analogy, whether it's this or gray swans and things like that.
U-shaped baths? Or...
I don't remember that one, but it sounds right.
Recessions.
Yeah.
Bath-shaped recessions.
Okay, so he...
Multi-quadrennial.
He talked about...
Let's play Martin Sorrell bingo.
We should. We really should. We could monetize that. So he said they're planning to double their spend on Snapchat this year, which would put it around the $200 million mark, which is a lot of money. But that made these comments on CNBC late last week. So interesting comments there. Snapchat, of course, is the Bloomberg IPO. It goes public. As more information about the company and its business operations, reach the public, the stock is down. They did not have a good first quarterly earnings. Stock is down 40% since it went public, and their second quarter earnings are in a few hours. So no more then.
Yeah, but it's like a lot of these platforms. There's a honeymoon period, and they go public, but then they find they can't actually make their business. We all love Twitter, but it's still searching for its business model. In terms of you recommending clients, platforms, Heidi, how do you do that? How do you decide whether to go in on a platform or whether to just sit and watch, or how do you make those decisions in your agency?
So I think Snapchat has been an interesting platform over the past year, even if the bloom is off the rose from an investor perspective and it's not quite as shiny as it may have been a few months ago. But it's very interesting in how young it skews and how you can lay it in with the retailer program, for example. So we did a program for a client in the UK, partnering with a retailer that had a special brand filter, and it was seen as wildly successful and connected to sales. So very micro,
okay. So
but
that was
big
great.
pop. So that was great. Instagram is most common. Facebook is still there, but when you look at the numbers of this flea growing, but you look at who's using it today, and granted, there may be something new in 5 years and they'll totally abandon it, but the potential is definitely there, and I think clients get really excited with the opportunity to try something new at fairly low risk.
Yeah, you're right about Instagram, and obviously that's owned by Facebook, so they've got taken that game. They're also trying to launch a Snapchat alike, aren't they?
Stories,
so it's a competitive market, no doubt about it. And I always think Facebook does better when it innovates rather than tries to copy, but it's got such might that it's still going to be significant. So yeah, we'll see what their numbers look like. Well, we've talked about agency trends a lot actually, so let's skip that one given the time and talk finally about John Iwata's new role at IBM, Frank.
John Iwata is, of course, one of the most washed people in marketing communications, and he is moving into the new role of Chief Brand Officer at IBM, reporting to Ginny Rometty, the CEO of IBM. Some moving chairs here. They also have a CMO who is no longer reporting to him, but up to Ginny Rometty, and that's Michelle Peluso.
Yeah. Who's speaking at our conference, our Swipe Right conference on October the 12th, so which is going to be fantastic. Last question for you, Heidi. Are you tending to deal more with marketers now, or brand, or are you still dealing with a lot of chief communications officers?
I have a couple CEOs who like to be marketers in their spare time. So it's a good question. I think, everyone in the industry thought 10 years ago, oh my God, we have to get close to marketing, we have to get close to marketing. I think in a lot of organizations, they have done a much better job integrating internally, which was a big barrier for us. So I would say two things. One, it is more evenly split than it's ever been, but in some of the clients we work with, the communications role has also been elevated as the value of PR has been recognized. So
well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I think that is actually super encouraging because agencies can do great work when they have respected clients internally.
Sure. All right, well, Heidi, glad the year's going well for you, and
Thank you.
Forward to reporting on the full year numbers, next year's agency report. And thanks for joining us. Thank you, Frank. Yeah, Swipe Right, October the 12th. Fantastic lineup, to be honest. We've got the CMO of Facebook as well, Gary Briggs. We've got the girl with no job, who's an incredibly popular influencer, another influencer, Manna Matthews, people from Tinder, we've got people from Box, we've got a brilliant lineup actually. It's a must-attend event. And our PR Week Awards are open for submissions, the Oscars of the PR industry, so make sure you're working on those and go to the PR Week Awards website to find out more information. But that's all we got time for. We'll see you next time on the PR Week.